This time we're gonna see how we can add several motions together. We have been doing actually this since the beginning, but you probably haven't noticed. But the idea is that if you have an object and you are pushing this object to the right, and at the same time you're pushing this object down, then the result will be an animation in the down and right direction, in this diagonal direction. So this is very simple. Let's see it in a program running here. I have this very simple program where I'm declaring three variables here, x and y, which are initially 10, and this a variable, which will be an angle, but is not used anywhere yet. And in the setup, I'm setting the size, the background color, white, no borders for our shapes, and smooth, so everything looks better. And each time the draw function is called, I'm using a red color to draw an ellipse at the position x and y, which is not changing at the moment. So we just have this dot there static. So we know that if here each time we, for example, increase x by 1, the thing will be moving to the right. If instead of using x, we use y, it will be moving down. And what happens when we use both? When we use x equals x plus 1 and y equals y plus 1. So we have, as we expected, as we saw in this drawing here, the thing is moving down and right. What would happen if we try to move right and left, and we are moving in those two directions at the same speed? Then nothing would happen. We wouldn't move. Let's see this here. We are adding 1 to x, and then I take x and I subtract 1. So I'm adding 1, removing 1. Then the circle stays there in the same position. If one of the numbers is bigger than the other, so now I'm moving 2 to the right and 1 to the left, the result is moving 1 to the right. So instead of doing this, let's leave it moving down and right. X, we are increasing x and we are increasing y, so now we go down and right. Now let's add to this motion some oscillating motion, right and left. What will happen then? I'm gonna take here, I'm gonna declare another variable, x2, and I'm gonna make that equal to sine of this angle, and I'm gonna multiply it by 50, so we can go 50 pixels to the right or to the left. I'm gonna add here x and x2, so I'm combining the two motions. Here we are moving each time 1 pixel to the right, 1 pixel down, and I'm adding some values which can be between 50 and minus 50. Finally, let's increase a equals a plus 0,1. So we get different values from the sign of a, otherwise we would always get the same value. And what happens now? Okay, so we can see here the combination of those two motions. One is down and right, and then we have another motion which is oscillating. So here we are adding both. Then what we get is something like this. Now let's add something else. Let's add the down and right motion with a circular motion. What do we get in this case? So let's declare here another variable. Float y2 is cosine of a times 50. So we have, they're very similar. We have x2 and y2. One is using sine and the other is using cosine. Both are using the same angle. And let's add here y plus y2. So now we have this motion, which is down and right. And we are adding this other motion, which is circular. It has a radius of 50 pixels. And there we have this spiral, or this something looks like a spring. So it's going down and right, and at the same time it's moving in a circle. We are getting something like this. We are not limited to adding just 2, we could add more than 2. We can add down and circular, and let's call it R, like randomness. And what do we get in this case? So let's create here two more variables. Float x3 is random between -3 and 3. And a similar y3 is random between -3 and 3. So this is adding some randomness. So I'm gonna add x and x2 and x3. And here I'm gonna add y3. And we have something similar to our previous animation, but you can see it has this nice like handmade effect. And depending on how large these numbers are, it will be more or less random. In this case, we were getting something like this. As a final example, let's add 2 circular motions. Let's see what do we get in that case. It's gonna depend on 2 things. One is how fast each of these motions are, and also how large or what's the radius of this circle. Is one circle much larger than the other? Is one moving much faster than the other? For our example, let's have one large and slow, and the other small and fast. Let's get rid here of our randomness. Gonna remove this x3. Just going to add 2 different motions. Since we want to have 2 different angles, one moving faster than the other, let's have here this float A and then a float B. Both will start at 0, but one will increase faster than the other. So this is gonna be B equals B plus 0,01. This is our slow circle, which should be bigger. Instead of moving our circle all the time, let's just leave it on the center of the screen. So I'm gonna put here width divided by 2, and here height divided by 2. So now we have a static part. This part doesn't change, it's always in the center of the screen. Then we're gonna have this fast circular motion, which is increasing at 0,1 radians each time, and the radius is 50, so it's small. And let's add here another float x3. Is sine of b. B is increasing slower than a. And let's make that larger. Let's enter here a 300. And float y3 is cosine of b times 300. So we have our fast and small circular motion and our slow and large circular motion. And let's add here x3 and y3 to our ellipse. So we are adding now 3 values, x, x2, x3, and y, y2, y3. And what do we get now? Okay, I think we went a bit too far with the 300 here. Let's try with 200. It looks like it's too large. And there is our combination of 2 circular motions together. It looks kind of like a flower. So now we know the result for this is something like that. So you can go ahead and try with different values here what happens when there is a bigger or a smaller difference between the 2 radii, and what happens with different speeds too. Currently we have one angle increasing 10 times faster than the other. What happens when the difference is not so large? Now you should have an idea of how to add different motions together to get a more complex motion. In this case, we are starting with a static part at the center of the screen. We have one circular motion and another circular motion, and we are adding all those values together to get an interesting shape.